if he agrees. Rabbit sets his glasses and thoughtfully replies he heard that he didn't have a successor. Kan points toward Yanwu and answers there he is, his successor. Hearing this, Youngnu stands beside him surprised and surprisingly looks toward Kan. After this, Youngwoo shouts at Kan about what is he talking about. Older man is he to decide. However, the rabbit stands up from the stole, asking if he can see that he is just a passerby, and then he asks if he is okay. Meanwhile, a notification window appears before Yanwu that the quest item production competition with the Miro Company has been created. For the item production competition with the Miro Company, quest clear condition, he has to win the contest against the Miro Company. If he clears this reward, his reputation within Winston will increase to 500 plus, and his affinity with the Winston residents will prize 600 gold. If he fails in this quest, his reputation within Winston falls to a minimum, and then Kan's smithy will be handed over to the Miro Company. Then they ask him if he would accept this quest. Youngwoo, reading the notification, shouts wait a minute, and then he looks toward the panel where the prize of the quest clear was written, as it was 600 gold. On the other side, Rabbit stands up, sets his glasses, and tells Youngwoo young man if he isn't related, stay out of this. Stay calm. While Youngwoo stands there, thinks about money, and smiles, thinking he is on and will trample on everyone. Rabbit stands before Yaognu and looks toward him, replaying that he understands. After this, the rabbit turns, saying to Kan very well that they will inform him about the location soon enough, and then he leaves. As Kan and Yaognu stand there in the smithy, Kan looks toward him and apologizes to him for this. Then he says he had to protect the smithy. Youngwoo looks toward Rabbit and replies, no, don't worry about it. Then he blushed and pressed his lips and controlled himself to laugh, thinking since he would gladly sell his soul for plus 7 lakh won. While Kan stood behind, he was embarrassed, thinking he had not done right with this young boy. However, reading the interface, Youngwoo blushed, thinking it was in a grade item production competition with the Miro Company quest. If it were a combat-related quest, it would be impossible for a level 17 like him. But he is a legendary blacksmith who even crafted an epic grade item. Then he blushes and smiles, thinking about what he will obtain after clearing that quest and thinking it won't be a problem. Meanwhile, Kan gets there holding the sword in his hands. Standing before Youngwoo, he says he has some materials remaining since the shop was closed. They can train with these. Yaognu turns his head and looks toward the sword, gets silent, and doesn't respond in return. After this, both of them move toward the item production room. There, Kan shows him the sword, and Youngwoo checks the swords one by one, lying before him on the table. While checking the sword, he asks why he didn't report these events to the Lord. While burning the wooden stick with the UPS heater on the side wall, Kan replies that the Lord is part of it all. The Miro Company is bribing him. Yaognu, putting his arms on the table, looks toward Kan asking if Winston isn't part of Earl Stein's territory. Then he asked if he had tried looking for the Earl himself. While putting the chopped firewood into the blast furnace, Kan replied he had made an appeal and even went looking for himself. But the Lord intervened each time, and he was unsuccessful. Youngwoo, putting his arms on the table behind his back, carefully listened to him. Then Youngwoo says don't worry too much. He won this competition. He even left him in charge since he trusted him. Hearing this, old man Kan, with teary eyes, turns his head and looks toward Youngwoo, and then wiping his tears, he replies, of course he does. Thanks for cheering him up. If his son had been alive, he would have been an upstanding man like him. As Kan gets emotional and Youngwoo shows him, his muscles blush and his smile replays. Don't cry and come over. His worries will disappear if he sees him with the bellows. Youngwoo presses his shoulder, starts sweating, and then presses his lips, thinking why he is being kind, unlike his usual self. Then he asks himself in his mind nicely, since Kan is his lucky gold, he might unconsciously be right. But old man Kan reminds him of his aging grandfather. His gentle words and attitude are very similar. Fighting with fire and steel alongside someone he is fond of, moments like these make him satisfied like reality. However, while thinking about this, Youngwoo helped Kan in the equipment production process. Kan, with the iron tongs, sets the iron rod, and Youngwoo helps him in the next step. After this, Youngwoo made an iron shield with this iron rod, and then he made more iron shields by putting the iron rod in the blast furnace. However, Youngwoo returns to his home, sitting in his gaming capsule. He yawns and takes the tongs. While talking to himself, it's still 4 a.m., and he asks if he should sleep for 30 more minutes. While taking tongs, he told himself that he had 2 days inside the game, but the results were good this time. After this, while looking out the room window, he thinks Khan's character differs from Smith's from Baron. He wasn't in normal condition, but his skills were outstanding, like an advanced blacksmith. He wants to see Khan and learn from him, and then he gets silent and starts sweating, thinking he has finally gone crazy. After this, he leaves his room and opens the door, saying good morning to his parents. His mother looks toward him and smiles, asking Youngwoo if he rested well. He woke up early today. As her mother was serving tea to his father and they both were at the breakfast table, Youngwoo sat on the chair before his father, saying he would have more energy if they had eel for breakfast. While having breakfast, his father smirked and asked him why he would want eel when he doesn't even have a girlfriend. His mother smiles and serves him breakfast, and he angrily turns his eyes and looks toward his mother, saying that it's offensive. He could quickly get a girlfriend if he wanted to. His mother laughs, saying their child can confidently talk back to them now. Then he asks his parents about his grandfather's health, and hearing this, they both get shocked and give him an astounded expression. While Youngwoo looks toward them both, asking what with that reaction, his father replies nothing. He doesn't usually ask about him. He is doing well. Let's go and see him together next time. Youngwoo answers all right, and then he smiles and starts having breakfast, thinking he will see him this time. The next day, in Miro's company, Valmont, while having breakfast, Rabbit goes to him and informs him about the condition he made with Khan. As soon as Valmont hears this, he throws the piece of sweat on Rabbit's face, asking what he says and why he did such an unnecessary thing. As he stood before him, smiling, he shouted, it was a smithy that would be theirs as long as he couldn't pay the debt. Then he raised his voice, asking why he made unnecessary arrangements and giving him a chance. After this, he clenched his fists and teeth, shouting, asking did he secretly made a deal with Khan. Rabbit wipes his face and, looking down, replies, the business district needs to improve because the Miro company took the residents' properties. Considering the Miro company's long-term business, being friendly with the residents is best. Hearing this, Valmont shouts, asking if he is trying to teach him a lesson. He is the one who bought those lands and those rights, those ungrateful idiots. Rabbit stands there looking king toward him, thinking this is Valmont's limit, and it will be more challenging for the Miro company. However, Rabbit replies that the presidents greatly respect Khan, who has been resisting alone against the company. Valmont angrily looks toward Rabbit, asking so what? Rabbit replies they must create the impression that they are giving him and his skills another chance. That way, they will be able to improve the company image, and hearing this Valmont smirk, the company will be able to attract loyal customers. Then he laughed, saying if this brings profit, it wouldn't be so bad. After this, he shouts at Rabbit, asking what about their opponent, could he win? According to their investigation, Rabbit replies that he is just an ordinary young boy with no reputation. They have already prepared a craftsman who will win this for them. Hear this Valmont smile, saying that it is perfect, they will destroy them. Rabbit stands there and thinks even if he is a nameless person, they will send out their best blacksmith to face him. This kind of unknown variable is what he is most wary of. On the other side, in Smithy, Khan's friend visits him as they both sit there and talk, and Youngwoo stands far away and makes equipment. Khan tells his friend everything that Youngwoo has done for him. Khan's friends hear this and all get surprised, then he surprisingly looks toward Youngwoo, asking that bony boy erased Veil and his men. Khan folded his arms, sat beside him and smiled, and his friend looked toward Youngwoo as he was amazed. Then he surprisingly said he looked like an innocent young lamb to him. Khan turns his head and looks toward his friend. He replies to the older man, unlike his appearance, he is one incredible boy. Youngwoo, while making his equipment, turns his head angrily, asking to keep it down because the sound of their conversation was reaching him. Khan's friend, looking toward Khan, asks him, the older man, if it is true. Youngwoo, while hammering the equipment, turns his head, looks toward Khan, and becomes silent. Meanwhile, a group of people holding the notice enter a smithy. One of them shouts, asking if this notice is everywhere in the town. Then he showed that notice to them as it was the notice from Miro Company, and it was written on the notice that Miro Company would compete against Khan, putting the smithy on the line. Also, it was written that if Khan is victorious, they will pay off his debt and give up on their rights to the smithy. It will be transferred to them if the company is victorious, but Khan will have the operating right to it. After this, Khan read that notice and, holding it in his hand, looked toward the villagers, asking if it was the truth and why the fuss. The person who gave the notice to Khan replied that they thought the company was as good as they thought. After this, another villager stood there and added his point. Even though they are holding a competition, they genuinely respect Mr. Khan. Then, the person with skin hair who gave the notice to Khan asks, since they say they will have the operating rights if they try to coexist with the resident. However, Youngwoo stands aside and reads the notice, thinking that although they sent them gangsters, he can feel a lot of thoughtfulness from this notice. They might be excellent companions. Khan tears the notice, throws it on the ground, and shouts, saying the Miro company monopolized the lands and the business district and got them into poverty. Then he angrily asks the villagers if they seriously forget their misery just because of a measly piece of paper. Hearing this, one of the villagers stands there scratching his face and replies true, they are genuinely pathetic, and the other stands beside him and asks to see. Then he says he got tricked again, and this isn't the first time they have backstabbed them. Hearing this, Youngwoo stands there looking aside, thinking he almost got tricked as well. Meanwhile, a boy stands in between villagers, raises his hand, and tells them to listen to him. Youngwoo looks toward that boy, holding the notice in his hand. After this, the boy, while raising his hand, presents his point and says, according to what he has heard, that the Miro company bought the lands and commercial area from the residents. Then he asked who must be made aware of the Winston development plaintiff. He was right. Then he asks back if they forced him to sell them. Youngwoo hears this and surprisingly looks toward the boy, thinking this boy has a green mark on his head. He is a user. Then the boy says he planned to leave the village after exchanging the land for money. But lately, he decided to remain because of the development plans and his self-interest, not Miro company's fault. However, the villager with the skin's hair shouts and abuses the boy, asking an outsider to dare to talk like he is the company spy. However, the boy extends his hand toward the villagers and stops them, saying he is not there to fight. The company's priority is profiting. As long as he admitted that fact, the bright green light spread behind his back as the boy was talking. Then the boy, raising his hand, says he can create a symbolic relationship with the company. After all, the company can't persist without the residents. Hearing this, Youngwoo and all the villagers are surprised. Surprisingly, the villagers with skin hair say he is right. If the company profits, their situation will improve. While Youngwoo stands, she looks toward that boy, thinking the conversation flow has changed. What is this boy? Meanwhile, he gets notified of an item production competition with the Miro company, as the Miro company has asked Khan to compete in a blacksmith game. However, Khan's condition is at its worst. Khan decides that the competition is too stiff for him and passes it on to him. If he clears this quest, he gets the reward of a reputation within Winston plus 100 increase in affinity with Winston. Hearing this, Khan was amazed. Then, he surprisingly looked toward that boy, asking if he wasn't a meddlesome young man. Then he asked his name. The boy scratched his head and smiled, saying kindly excuse his rudeness. He was so onto his thoughts. Then he says he is Hiroi, while Youngwoo suspiciously looks toward that boy, thinking the atmosphere changed in an instant, then asks himself what he is exactly. After this, Khan looks toward Hiroi, saying he is right. Having a symbolic relationship with a large company in the long run is better. However, Winston Village is part of Earl Stime's territory. There is a local statute called the Rights of the People in the Stime Earldom. However, Hiroi asks for the people's rights, and Khan explains that the president has the right to be informed about their area of residence faster than anyone else. Earl Stime imposed this right on the people himself, and due to the pioneering age in the north, their new lands had significantly impacted the nearby cities and villages. Then Khan tells us to prepare for change and share information with the residents that would maximize their profits. That is Earl Stime's will. Hearing this all, Hiroi thoughtfully replies, so the problem is that the company ignores Earl's will. The Lord must be responsible for allowing the company to monopolize the information about the development plans. After this, Khan replies that this is the reason behind the conflict. Hiroi turns and steps ahead, stops, turns his head back, and looks toward Khan, saying he has convinced him. It appears that there is something he must do, and then he looks toward the villagers, saying he has heard that the Lord and the company have blocked their appeals to the Earl. One of the villagers replies that it is accurate, and Hiroi says the Lord and the company's evil deeds must be revealed. Then he extends his hands, saying he will secretly deliver their pleas to the Earl. Hearing this, the villagers get happy and smile, saying there is finally hope, and then they thank Hiryo. While Youngwoo stands behind and thinks this is impossible. This boy, how did he do that? He didn't receive the quest, but they made them give him a quest. After this, he moves from there to the forest side. As he is on the way, Youngwoo follows him. Youngwoo angrily calls him from behind. Hiryo turns, asking what his status must be in front of the smithy. Youngwoo angrily asks, and then Youngwoo, looking toward him, says he will ask him directly. Then Youngwoo asks if he is sure he had received a quest from the Miro company in the beginning, so why did he change sides? Hiryo uses his digital skills and the panel appears before him. Then he turns and looks toward Youngwoo. His goodness shares quest information. Then, the information panel appeared before Youngwoo and he read it. It was written on the panel for the resident of Winston. He has betrayed the company for the residents, escaped from the company's pursuit, and revealed Winston's current situation to Earl Stein. In the precise condition, an audience with Earl Stein was written in the clear reward section if he cleared this quest. He will get the reward of the Apostle of Justice Tactile Max Affinity Reputation with the residents of Winston gift from Earl Stein. Youngwoo, reading the panel, is surprised and asks what's with these incredible rewards. After this, Youngwoo angrily looks toward Hiryo, saying he is not jealous and telling him how he made them give him the hidden quest. Hiryo replies, but he does look jealous. Then he asks Yaonu if he notices that he made them give it to him. Then he says well, he guessed he could tell him to commemorate this event. Then he makes a fist and raises his index finger, explaining it's a method that uses the degree of freedom to satisfy. He can get a related quest if he actively meddles and intervenes with the NPC's circumstances. After this, he says it's a method that only the early users know about, so he probably didn't. Then Hiryo says it will soon start spreading on various sites. Only the early users have been using this method, so don't be upset. Hearing this, Youngwoo angrily looked toward him and lowered his head. He was angry, and the black aura spread behind his back. Sees this, Hiryo looks toward Youngwoo and asks what's wrong. Yaonu, with an angry face and teary eyes, replies he is also an early user. Hearing this, Hiryo laughed and winked, asking what, and he still didn't know every early player used this method. Then he laughs loudly, saying he is a funny one. Let's be friends. Yaonu starts to cry and shout at him, saying he got lost, and then he logs out from the game. A bright light spreads there, and Youngwoo disappears while Hiryo stands on their folded arms, looking toward that light. Then he put his hand on his stomach, thinking he got mad by himself and left, and then he stepped ahead and departed on his journey, talking to himself, well, hurry up. He shouldn't be wasting time there. His level is only at 127, even though he has played 18 hours daily since the game's release. Then, on the way, he thinks it is because his class is Orator. He presses his lower lip and puts a hand on his neckline, thinking his only way to attack is a spiteful tongue. It is harder to level up than other classes, so he steps ahead and continues walking, thinking of minimal weapons, low health, and fighting power skills. The most fatal weakness is having no escaping technique, and he needs courage stats that permanently increase attack power and defense. Every time it grew by 10 points, and he couldn't become a ranker just through quests he got from talking. Meanwhile, the notification panel about the maximum affinity he gets from Earlstein appears before him. This skill was the Apostle of Justice and the creation of the Courage stat, while the creation of that skill was Unbreakable Justice. However, he arrived near the castle, and many guards stood at the door holding spears for protection. Hiryo stood there up, thinking he needed to pass the castle gate to reach Earlstein. However, he goes down, steps toward the guards, smiles and shouts his hair, saying goodbye to everyone. He is trying to go outside. Then he stands there halfway, thinking the guards are standing and must talk out of there. After this, he looks toward the guards and says he is a traveler. If nothing is wrong, please let him pass. The guard stays silent and doesn't respond to him. Sees this, he gets speechless and thinks there is no reaction to the conversation. This is ominous. Meanwhile, Rabbit arrives behind him, saying they won't answer his words. He has instructed them not to do so. Hiryo turns his head to look, then looks toward Rabbit. He thinks, why is he there? After Rabbit folds his arm back and says, the instruction told him to report to him after instigating the residents. Hiryo, looking toward him, thinks how annoying he needs to borrow the power of the persuasion skill. As long as he uses it correctly, he can control most NPCs as he wishes. However, he raises his hand and uses his digital skill, and the notification appears that persuasion, the passive skill, has been activated. After this, Hiryo says to Rabbit he came there to plan his strategy of instigating the residents while taking a walk, and then he asks if it is different from the basis of creating a plan. Rabbit replies it seems that he has overestimated him, and Hiryo, with a sad face, stayed silent. Then Rabbit replies that he failed to create a commotion even though they had confused the residents with the notice, and then asks if this could be a betrayal. Hiryo sweats and clenches his teeth, thinking persuasion didn't work. Then Rabbit looks toward his two guards who stand behind him and says he has learned from experience to always prepare for a betrayal, and he is sure they understand why he is arresting them. Meanwhile, Hiryo runs away from there, thinking he can't give up on the world like this, he needs to escape. As soon as he runs, the guard throws the sickle toward him and grabs him by his neck. He shouts and takes out his knife, thinking this isn't much of a weapon, but he is in a rush. At the same time, they grab him by the neck and pull him backwards. However, the guard hit the iron spear in his hand, holding that knife to cut the sickle belt. His knife falls from his hand while the guard ties that belt around his neck. Meanwhile, the bright light spreads all around him, and they pull him backwards. He angrily looks toward them, thinking he can't get away with his battle power force, he should log out right now. He tries to log out, but gets the notification that he can't end the game. There he sees the notification CL, inches his fist, and tries to free his neck from that belt. However, the guard took him to the rabbit, and he stood there silently looking down while the rabbit stood before him, folding his arms back. He says to stop his futile resistance and asks if he knows how they can neutralize his logout spell. Since he will resurrect if they kill him, they are incarcerating him, and then he orders the guards to imprison him in the castle's dungeon. However, Hiryo gets the message that the quest for the residents of Winston has created a wait, and then another notification appears that Rabbit has captured him, and he will imprisoned in the castle dungeon with no hope of escape. However, if he persists through the difficult times, the Apostle of Justice he has failed to become will appear and save him. And don't log out for 50 hours in real time because this is a dangerous quest, and they warn older people and those of poor health should give up on the quest. After reading that notification, Hiryo gets silent and scared, thinking 50 hours is impossible. In contrast, another notification appears that they ask him if he will give up on this quest. However, Hiryo believes he has done 20 hours before, but he goes over that. The capsule system forcibly logs him out, and he can't connect again for 6 hours as a penalty. While on the way, the guards were taking him to the dungeon cell. He thinks staying in a small dungeon for 8 days and 8 hours of game time. It will be mentally straining and potentially dangerous, but he is just a single man with no job. There is no one to interrupt him. Thinking this, he gets sad, presses his lower lip between his teeth, and is about to cry. However, standing there, he closes his eyes, thinking that if he converts the capsule into trance mode, his body might hold on. He must take advantage of this opportunity to do an S-grade linked hidden quest. Now he will do this. Moreover, it gets dark at his back, and the bright light in smoke emerges from his body. Then he gets notified that he has accepted the quest, and time starts counting down. After this, another notification appears that the second-class Apostle of Justice partners the one who overcame hardships. His stats will be increased by 20 when he is with the Apostle of Justice. However, the capsule trance mode activated, and he got a notification that from now on, his brainwaves would be monitored to log out when danger is detected forcibly. SA will dispatch executives with medical equipment to his location when his health is harmed. It is possible to shut down the capsule from the outside. If there are attempts to shut down the capsule, an SA employee will be dispatched to protect the capsule. However, lying in the capsule, System Hiryo thinks he is begging him as long as he helps him end this quest. He will be loyal to him for the rest of this game. Then, lying in the capsule system, he closes his eyes, thinking he will be waiting for him, the Apostle of Justice. However, in SA Group Company at 11:33 p.m., the game satisfies this vast system where every user's actions change the world. 2 billion users make 2 billion variables. Therefore, to sustain the world, errors and bugs can't be permitted. However, Lim Chiolho sits in the control room and controls the whole game system. There, he gets the message that Quest B408 has been activated. They request him to grant permission to dispatch an emergency executive. Hearing the message, Lim Chiolho removes his glasses, asking permission granted. He will be there soon. After this, he gets up and comes out of the controlling room thinking B408, even though it's an S-grade hidden quest that activates on particular conditions. The clear reward is a second class. If he succeeds, it will be the birth of the first user satisfied to have 2 classes. However, he needs to persist through 200 hours of game time. It's a quest that can harm the user. After this, he goes to the conference room where the meeting occurs. He starts the meeting with his team members, and everyone's panel appears before them. However, all the panels show the same data, and they sit in the conference room discussing. They discuss Hirio, his real name, and his age, as his real name is Dam Alunbatter. He is 25 years old, and he is the Mongolian user who activated B408. Lim asks them if only 3% of the Mongolian population plays the game. What an incredible phenomenon. His manager replies that his class is Orito, and he was weak battle Po, but he still managed to rise to level 172 by using his class trait to clear quests only. Lim asks director Yoon Sangmin about the Mongolian branch manager. He sits at the chair next to him and fearfully replies while searching for something on his panel that they are connected to. After this, one of them reacts to Lim. Park Yoonhyuk, the Mongolian branch manager, and the branch executives are also present. Lim adds his point by hearing this, saying they have requested a conference due to the B408 quest. Then he asks if the user Alunbatter's safety has been secured. He replies to Lim that they are monitoring him in real time, and that the medical personnel are ready to depart anytime. Furthermore, the Mongolian government has agreed to cooperate, and he also has a suggestion. Hearing this, Lim looks toward him to know about his suggestion. He replies by releasing the news about the potential first user with multiple classes to the media. If the first user with 2 classes is Mongolian, it will significantly help boost the market. After this, one said Mongolia needed more activity, so they had difficulty improving the market. This is a great chance. However, the lady sitting beside the chair to replies yes, many refuse to use the game capsule. Then she asks if maybe it was due to their nomadic tendencies. However, a man sitting in the meeting replies that she is too optimistic, and then he asks what if the quest fails after all the attention it gains. Then he clenches his teeth, saying they will be mocked for it. After this, the guy whom Lim questions the first wipes his eyes and says he doesn't have to worry that much. Lim sits before him, looks toward him surprisingly, and then explains as long as he doesn't get logged out due to some issues, it won't be much of a problem. The quest was made to be easily clearable by design. As everyone was sitting in the meeting looking toward their panel, he asked team leader Choi Na-hee if she realized his probability of success. While looking at her panel, she replies that she is just uploading her document so he can look. Then she says, however. At the same time, the man with maroon hair asks what, however, while searching for something on his panel. As he was searching for something on his panel, he suddenly was surprised to see and surprisingly asked that the probability of success was only 9%. Then he gets up and, putting a hand on the table, raises his voice. Wait, the user is supposed to be rescued by a hidden NPC in the B408 quest. However, the user will meet the mysterious Apostle of Justice in the underground prison, and the Apostle of Justice will rescue the user after listening to the situation in Winston. Then the guy with maroon hair shouts, telling afterwards the user will get a linked quest to help the Apostle and receive a big reward. Hearing this, Lim searches for his pen, stays silent, and doesn't respond. Then the guy with maroon hair asks Lim to, as long as the user's safety is secured, users clear this quest. Lim laughs at this question, surprisingly looks toward Lim, and asks what the matter is. Pointing to his panel, the president and Lim replies have another look at the document. Then he smiled, saying it seemed like there was a variable short quest information. The guy with maroon hair stands up and searches on his panel, asking what the document is. Everyone sits there and starts looking toward him. After this, Lim relaxingly sits on his chair, looking toward his panel, explaining that Hirio was supposed only to sharpen the information about the village to the Apostle of Justice. However, he revealed the quest information midway, leading to the mysterious Apostle of Justice becoming obsolete. Hearing this, the guy with maroon hair scratches and clenches his teeth, saying the user he shared it with is Grid. On the other hand, at Youngwoo's side, he was at the food stall, sitting on a chair heading down. He was crying loudly, and the bowl of soup, wine bottle and glass were lying on the table before him. He ran down to the table and punched the table, shouting even though he had only given him a quest worth 600 gold. Then he abuses older man Khan and asks if he should have given that extraordinary quest to him first, isn't he right? While the stall owner angrily looked toward him because he was creating noise and hitting the table, she was getting disturbed by him. However, Youngwoo, while having soup, cries and shouting at Khan, gave it to that crappy boy instead just because of a few words, even though he paid for his medical fees. Then he gave the empty bowl to the stall owner, asking to refill fish cake soup with some free radishes while tears flowed from his eyes. He extends his hand to give that empty bowl to her to fill while thinking of that obese, hot-headed older man. After this, at night time, Youngwoo returns to his home. He enters the house and removes his shoes, thinking it's 1 a.m. already. Let's try not to get caught. As soon as he pulls his boots, his sister gets their arms folded and shouts at him, asking if he should contact them if he will be late. Then she asks what time he thinks it is. Youngwoo, who is drunk, and then replies, asking if she is still not sleeping. Then, with a sad face, he looked at his sister as he was hiccuping and asked who she was. She turned to nag when a student wasn't asleep yet. Nahi covered her nose with her finger and replied she was worried because someone wasn't in the capsule. Then she asked him why he drank alcohol. Youngwoo smiles, gets near her, puts a hand in his pants pocket, and asks her about his pretty little sister when she worries about her brother. Sehi clenched her teeth and stepped backwards toward him, and then she angrily looked toward him and moved toward her room, saying stop joking with her. She was watching TV, washing himself, and sleeping while he teased her, asking if his little sister was going through puberty. However, she goes to her room while he stands there in a drunken state and smiles on the other side in the sophisty group of company. The guy with maroon hair surprisingly asks, shouldn't it be 0%? Manager Choi Nahi surprisingly looks toward him. Then he looks toward Lim and says this user's probability of success should be 0% rather than 9%. The supercomputer Morpheus must have had an error. However, he holds his head and Choi Nash looks toward his hand and says there is no such report. The man with maroon hair sighs, saying he knows he just said that to let off steam. Then Lim sits on his chair and smiles, saying he is like that because the scenario changed and the chances at success are unclear. Choi Nahi asks what, and Lim replies now the one who needs to learn of Hiryo's incarceration isn't the mysterious apostle of justice but Grid. Hearing this, the man with maroon hair looking toward his supercomputer Morpheus thinks this Shin Youngwoo boy is the worst. He is still at level 21 even though he got a legendary class. Then he asks himself what he has been doing all this time. It's a pity the legendary class went to a user with 0 productivity like him. Another hidden content will go to waste because of him. Then he clenched his fist, thinking this boy was fatally toxic to satisfy. However, one of them folded his arms and, closing his eyes, asked if he could fail the quest. At this rate, he had missed the perfect chance to advertise the game. Hearing this, Lim calmly sits on his chair and smiles, thinking about the only things he has done after getting the legendary class. He is crafting epic grade arrows and receiving a class quest. This is hard to predict, but if he had to say something. Thinking this, he touches the screen of his supercomputer Morpheus. Then he smiles, thinking watching his incompetence transcend common sense is entertaining. Moreover, there are 3 epic classes other than the most recently revealed Blood Warrior. The details on the other 2 have yet to be released, and the very first epic class user is unidentified, while the second one was revealed to be held by the 7th place ranker. Because of that, the community and broadcasts have yet to stop debating about what the other 2 epic classes were. Then, Lim thinks about who the very first epic class user was. The next day at Steim Raeldom Akero Dungeon, a group of men stood there looking toward a beautiful girl, and their mouths were watering as they all fell in love with a girl named Euphemina. The girl, Euphemina, stands there, and they all lovingly look towards her, saying they are having difficulty hunting and asking them to join their party. The other man and his group of people with watery mouths lovingly look toward her, requesting no, please come with them. They will share a lot of loot with her. After this, one of them raises his hand and looks toward her lovingly, saying, well, give them all the loot, please come with them. Every man there wanted her to join their group as they all were impressed by her beauty. However, a lady and her companion stand were getting jealous, thinking why everyone was attracted to Euphemina. Her companion clenched her teeth, saw that scene before her eyes, and says even though they didn't bat an eyelid when she joined the party, the lady angrily looked toward the man, and Euphemina asked what's all this fuss about. Then she abuses Euphemina, saying see there, All the guys have been fawning over her since earlier. After this, Euphemina looks at the crowd of men, addressing everyone she sees. She is joining the strongest users party, so please demonstrate their powers. Hearing this, every man blushed and clenched their fist, replaying she had to keep that promise. Meanwhile, the monsters ran toward that group of men. And they, in return, run toward the beast to kill them, holding their weapons, shouting they will be the ones to take Lady Euphemina. However, a man with maroon hair attacked the monster with a scorching heat wave and shot them with his one-point break bow. The third one attacks the monsters with a thunderbolt, however, the explosion occurs. Meanwhile, the Lady Euphemina stands there, sees this, and thinks everyone's pretty average. Suddenly, the swirling frenzy appeared, and a strong gust and fire tornado occurred. Euphemina stood there silently, watching this. And a man controlled this swirling frenzy, sees this she how powerful, who is that? Then, looking toward that man holding the swirling frenzy, he thinks it's his. He must have had quite a hard time leveling up until now. It's perfect against Pyro. Then she stands there smiling and lets her use that as well, and the bright, wavy edges emerge all around her body and her eyes start to glow. And she, while using her skill duplication, snatches that skill and absorbs it. Sees this, the man stands there holding the swirling frenzy, shouting, thinking about what is happening to him and his body. However, Euphemia creates the swirl in her hand while she gets the message that her swirling frenzy level 3 has been successfully duplicated. However, she looks toward the hand where she creates that swirl and receives the notification that the swirling frenzy is level 3. Generate a vortex for 5 seconds and deal 1500 to 3000 damage per second. Target agility will decrease by 8% and her mana consumption will be raised to 700. However, she stands there, creates the swirl in her hand, and stares at it, and then another notification appears that the skill is available for one use. He can keep it permanently until it is cast. After this, Euphemia stands there holding her magic swirl in hand, looking at that man, saying she is counting on his for next time. Also, her level is 190, and her skill is duplicator. The men came toward her, wiping her sweat, asking if she would go with them, Miss Euphemia. Meanwhile, she disappears and sees this. Both men stand there surprised. However, she returned to her place stand there. She thought it was perfect. It should be enough with this skill. It took her 63 days to prepare. For this S-grade quest, she sighs and steps ahead while her digital supercomputer Morpheus appears on her side and clicks it, thinking she needs to prepare totally to show quest information. However, the notification window appeared before her, and she read it. It was written on that window, Traitor of the Red Knights S. Pyro is the traitor who greatly injured Asmophil and defeated the target of Asmophil's vengeance Pyro, who is hiding within the Kesson Canyon. If she clears that quest, she gets the reward of an agent of revenge. She steps ahead, thinking good, let's begin. A huge door opened, and she entered, thinking the difficulties of S-grade quests were extremely high. Moreover, the enemy is an incredibly talented named NPC. She stood there thinking he must be stronger than most boss monsters. She stood there, a man upstairs sitting on his throne, holding his sword. She looks up at him. The notification appears to say that the eternal hermit Pyro has appeared. She stands and looks up toward him, clenching her fist, thinking he is Sharpen Empire's strongest knight Pyro. Pyro, sitting on his throne, looks toward her with his glowing eyes and asks Asmophil to send her there. She looks toward him, thinking she can do this. She had thoroughly prepared for this moment. Pyre sat there and sent the magic black iron arrow on her from the upside. She looked toward and shouted, and in a second she created the swirl in her hand and raised her voice, calling Tartan. However, Tartan, a huge monster-type man, appears from her hand where she holds the swirl and goes up, and Black Pyre attacks. Sees this, she stands down and smiles, thinking Traitan, the strongest defensive skill only known by the first-ranked Guardian Knight, and she only has 9 basic skills. The swirl starts swirling, and she stands there thinking, but she can use skill duplicate 3 times a day for 2 months. She has duplicated all kinds of skills used by top rankers. Thanks to that, she has the 50 highest grade skills in her skill list. Although she can only use them once, it clarifies this. Because she is a duplicator, the very first epic class user is satisfied. However, Pyro jumps up, holding his sword to attack her. She, in return, shouts the counter barrier and attacks Pyro with his magic. That magic wave returned toward him and stabbed his body. He called and clenched his teeth, saying this skill isn't. After this, she uses swirling frenzy power and attacks him with the fire swirl, thinking he probably won't die from this. She will beat him with everything she has got. After this, she attacks him with scorching heat wave magic of light, Tyrant's Majesty Spear of Darkness prelude to destruction. A huge explosion occurred. She stood there, bent because she was tired, and sighed, thinking, did he die? After this, she looks toward the destruction that occurs there and feels that she doesn't get a quest clear notification he is still alive, casting higher skills consecutively. The mana consumption is unbelievable. After this, she jumps and stands in the air, thinking she should keep her distance and recover mana using a potion. Meanwhile, Pyro jumped upward from that destruction and brought the tip of his sword near her eye. She sees this stand there in the air. She clenches her teeth, thinking he is unscathed. This skill is that it always kills when activated, fated to perish. However, Heir stands there in the air, safely looking toward her with his glowing eye, and angrily says he shall give her an inevitable death. However, Euphemian uses her nightmare projection skill and attacks. She has to survive no matter what. As the bright black and purple light spread there with her magic, she fell, while Pyre jumped up, holding his sword, asking her if she came for him herself. While falling, she uses her magic skill and lands safely, thinking of nightmare projection, an ultimate skill that traps the opponent in an illusion. And then she sits on the ground on her knees and angrily looks toward Pyre, thinking she has been keeping it to use in an emergency. It's only for a short while, but he will be trapped in an illusion where he is fighting against a Smoffle. She has to use this opportunity to replenish her mana and destroy him with more skills. Meanwhile, Pyro jumps and shouts to attack her with his magic. A notification appears before her about the warning. It was written on the notification that her physical abilities had fallen due to the excessive use of skills, and she can't use skills for a while, and all her stats have fallen by 50%. Euphemia gets scared, presses her lips, and gets speechless, thinking what, even though she has almost cleared the quest. Then she looks up toward Pyro, thinking that before he recovers, she has to while Pyro stands up in the air, holding his sword, and the purple aura spreads all over his body. While standing up in the air, Pyro, with his glowing eyes, looks toward her angrily. Euphemia stands there on the ground and presses her lips, thinking he has already recovered the monster. And her stats as a duplicator aren't enough. She was sweating and pressing her lips due to fear of death. She was scared and stood there. She got the notification that she had abandoned the quest. Her quest failed. After this, she spawned from there to the hill and rock stone and sat there on the rock stone. Sitting there, she uses her digital skills and the interface appears. She reads the interface to get information about her stats. She read the interface as written, and her level dropped by 2. Asmoffle's trust in her has decreased. Sitting there reading the interface, she thought 2 months' worth of effort just vanished into thin air. Then she pressed her lips, feeling that even though it was a great opportunity to gain a few, the title's effects would have been perfect for her. Then she scratched her hair and shouted how annoying it was such a rare S-grade quest. Meanwhile, a man gets there asking the sheriff if she misses Arena, and she turns and looks toward him. After this, she gets up, and the man tells her he has a message for her. She looks toward him and asks for a message. He replies that they would like her to take on a task if she doesn't mind. Hearing this, she uses her digital skills, and the interface appears to show that a quest has been generated before her. Reading the message, she thinks she could be more motivated because of Pyro, but he wants to give her some unimportant quest. Thinking this, she becomes speechless, and the interface appears before her that rewards 1500 golds, the title competitor. The competitor's fighting spirit stat will be opened, the luck stat will be opened, and the skill rolling dice will be generated. Reading that interface, she thinks of a title since he called her Arena. Then she smiles, thinking that Arena is the one she used to craft an item among the many aliases she has used until today. After this, she smiles and looks toward that man, asking if he is from the Miro Company. Right, she will do it. In the interface, it appears that in the item production game, she has received a request from the Miro Company to face and defeat the advanced Blacksmith Khan's successor in a production game. If she clears this quest, she will get the reward of 1500 gold. Her fighting spirit stat will be opened, her luck stat will be opened, and the skill rolling dice will be generated. But if she fails in this quest, her relationship with Miro Company will be degraded to the worst. However, she accepts that quest item production game. On the other side of the smithy, Youngwoo sits on the wooden table with a hanging leg while folding his other leg on the table. Also, his arm was on the table before him on which the equipment was kept. However, Khan stands before him, saying Yaogu, stop sulking, and he replies leave him be. He gave such a good quest to someone he had just met. Khan answers that since the company is monitoring the whole village, he will be eliminated if he tries to leave Winston. But an outsider like Hiryo will be able to avoid their suspicion successfully, and he can't put his benefactor in such a dangerous situation. Hearing this, Youngwoo nods in yes. After this, Khan sniffs, saying he wouldn't be able to live on if something were to happen to him since he thinks of him as his son. Youngwoo, sitting there, looked toward Khan, replying come on. No need to start crying again. Then Youngwoo sat up properly and smiled, saying let's get back to training. He then asked Khan if they had decided on a date for the competition. Khan, holding his elbow, turns his head and looks toward Youngwoo asking if he would be ready in 2 days. Youngwoo, taking tongs, smiles and excitedly replies he is. Let's show them what a real blacksmith is. However, they both start their equipment and item making training using the same method he used earlier. While hammering the iron rod, he thinks his proficiency will increase if he repeatedly uses his skills. He can feel his movements getting more precise and efficient as he hammers the iron rod. He received the notification that he had crafted a rare grade item. All his stats are +2, and his reputation across the continent is +30. He has crafted epic grade items, all his stats are +4, and his reputation across the continent is +80. His persistent stats have increased, and the dexterity stat has increased. While making the themes he sweats, thinking this feeling of improvement is exciting. However, after some time, he gets tired and rests his head on the back of the table, sitting with both hands on the table. He takes deep breaths, thinking he is completely burned out. Then using his digital skill, he reads the interface before him, thinking he wonders how much they have increased. The interface appeared before him, on which his blacksmith technique level was 1. And his blacksmith breathe level was also 1. Seeing this, he sighed, asking himself that's it. Even though he crafted so many items, it's different from that time with the Jaffa arrows. Then he wiped the sweat with the clothes from his head and looked toward the armor and sword lying on the table, thinking they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't have any high-grade materials because of the Miro company. They could sell a few epic grade items, but he can feel his proficiency increasing regardless of his stats. Moreover, he has gained an additional 130 points by crafting items, and another interface appears before him. He read the interfaces that appeared before him, thinking he had to allocate them to talent if he wanted to win the game. Then he, while sweating, holding his face, thinks, but if he thinks about how he almost got killed by the gangsters, he should also consider his other stats. As the interface appears before him, and he reads it and tells himself right, 60 in stamina and 70 in text entity, then the notification appears before him that his stamina has increased from 50-22 to 100+. His talent has risen from 99 to 100+. And due to increased stamina, his health has grown from 1000 to 1500. However, the bright light spread all around him. He smiled, thinking these were the stats of a level 21 user. As the interface appears before him, he reads his stats stamina level, thinking they rival the stats of a level 75 user. Then he looked toward the armor and sword lying on the table, thinking that his stats points increased every time he crafted high-grade items, while the bright golden light emerged from the armor and sword. Then, standing there, he thinks he can cover for his lack of combat skills. Then he clenches his fist and smiles, thinking he needs to do a lot of physical labor. But he is already used to the idea that he shall show them the fruits of his labor during tomorrow's battle. Therefore, the square was crowded with local NPC residents and users at Winston's Central Square Competition Day. People were slogging there. A villager standing there looking toward the crowd said so many NPC residents were gathered there. Sitting beside him, a boy wearing a mask replies to him. They are the residents who want to protect the smithy from the Miro company while thinking they are unrelated to this conflict. However, the villagers stand there and raise their voice. Youngwoo does his best. He absolutely cannot lose protect the smithy. However, Youngwoo stands before the furnace blast with all the materials needed for production, silently looking toward the furnace blast. Seeing him there, Valmont asks Rabbit if he is Youngwoo, looks at his equipment, and then asks if is he a low-level user. Then he says he looks like a competition between the beginner blacksmiths. How pathetic, let's go. After this, sitting on his throne, he asks how are their preparation coming, and Rabbit stands behind him, folded arms, and replies everything is according to the plan. After this, a guy with skin hair raises his voice, allowing him to introduce the lead star of today's competition. However, Euphemia raises her hand, saying the Miro Company's arena. As soon as the men stand there to see her, they all fall in love with her and are impressed by her beauty, and excitedly clench their fists, saying she is so pretty. Let's watch this. She can do it, girl. And then they slogged for the girl go girl. She didn't know what this was but won this game. She winked and kissed the men standing there, saying thanks for cheering for her boys. When they see this, they all get excited and start cheering for Arena's name. If she wins this game, they will cheer for her. However, Yagunwu stands there with folded arms, thinking she is pretty, then questions himself, doesn't she rival the blood of Yura's beauty? Then he smiles and turns his head, feeling the cheering. It is amazing, but they have the residents on their side. All the men sit there, fall in love with Arena, and are impressed by her beauty and blush, thinking she is so pretty. Youngwoo gets near her and poses before her. Bending his head down, Arena looks toward him surprisingly. The man of skin hairs, the coach host, looked surprised and looked down toward Youngwoo, requesting him to get up. Youngwoo gets up and stands before Arena. She smiles, saying Mr. Grid, since fate brought them together today, she will be in his care. Youngwoo gets furious and his eyes turn red, and he angrily looks toward her, replaying she is not his type, so don't mess with him, kid. Hearing this, she sweats, then she smiles and pulls her hair back with her hand, asking Kid if he isn't that rude to a beauty like her. Youngwoo clenches his teeth and angrily looks toward her, saying she does look pretty, but a little stupid girl like her shouldn't go around calling herself a beauty. Hearing this, she gets furious and clenches her teeth, thinking, what's with him? No man has ever treated her like this. And then she looked toward the audience side where the men were sitting and thought she would humiliate him in front of everyone. Then she shouted, asking why he called her a kid, and she was 20 years old. While Youngwoo folded his arms, standing before her smirk, replaying that doesn't mean anything to an older man like him. Then he says let's start the competition, and they both step ahead for the competition. The girl Arena, her real name is Euphemina, and her level is 188, and her class is Duplicator. However, the instructor hosted raised his voice. Today's competition's theme is a dagger. They had 3 hours to produce it. The one who creates the better dagger wins this game, while Irene starts her item production method, thinking if she wins, she will gain a new title and stats. But the only thing that bothers her right now is the quest's difficulty. Then she questions herself unknown, looking toward Youngwoo putting the firewood pieces in the blast furnace and thinking, does that mean her opponent's skills haven't been disclosed yet? While putting the firewood in the blast furnace, think whatever, it doesn't matter. Her plan will stay the same. Then she furiously believes that when he enters the crafting phase, she will duplicate his skill and press the blast furnace to see if they use the same skills. The luckier person will create an item with a higher rating. Even though this is a gamble, she has a 50 by 50 chance of winning. Then she turned her head and looked toward Youngwoo, thinking she would win this, while Youngwoo, with all his might, was hammering the iron rod. Sees this, she gets speechless thinking about what he has already started forging, and then she uses her magic to create the blessed blacksmith hammer, thinking don't get nervous. Strictly speaking, there is no difference in skills. If so, the one with a better tool will have more chances of winning. She holds the blessed blacksmith hammer in her hand and thinks no matter how good of an item this is, if she doesn't have the